discussion on this evening. Many of you may or may not be aware of the monthly Zoom discussion sponsored by Manifested Purpose LLC, Family Life Education and Coaching, endorsed by the Black Agenda Alliance. We have been hosting monthly dialogue via Facebook Live for 3 months now. The last 2 discussions were about the process of grief and how to adopt healthy coping mechanisms. Today, we are recording our 3rd discussion centered around surviving sexual assault and/or abuse. I am the founder of Manifested Purpose LLC and facilitator of tonight's discussion, Carol Warner. I've been trained in crisis intervention and have been trained through the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and I've also completed the Darkness to Light evidence-informed training in order to better facilitate this discussion. I want to provide a few disclaimers with regards to our discussion this evening. First, I want to acknowledge the fact that our discussion tonight may become triggering to some of you in the audience, and we also may experience moments where the discussion will trigger an emotion for our panelists as well. If at any moment you as an audience member, especially if you are a survivor yourself, experience feelings of anxiety or stress at any time, we encourage you to log off of the live discussion and ground yourself by slowly breathing in and then out for a few rounds. And then please reach out to someone you know and trust will help you through the process, okay? If you or someone you know are currently experiencing a form of sexual assault and/or abuse of any kind, we highly encourage you to reach out to the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673. Again, that's 1-800-656-4673. A support specialist is available to speak with you. The call is confidential and you can remain anonymous. The purpose of the discussion tonight is coming from a place of healing, informing, educating, and encouraging survivors of sexual abuse to speak their truth, face their trauma, and empower other survivors to share their testimony of how they've overcome. It takes a brave individual to speak publicly about the traumas of sexual abuse and expose such traumatic experiences. So all questions have been vetted and have been approved by each panelist. So right now I want to go ahead and welcome our panelists for tonight's discussion, Ms. Nicole Lewis and Ms. Sharice Gregory. Welcome, ladies.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming and attending. And
thank you.
Yes, thank you for being a part of such an important discussion. I really appreciate you both. I'm gonna go ahead and have you all further introduce yourselves, and then we can go right into the discussion, okay? So I wanna start with Mrs. Nicole Lewis.
Thank you, Kara. It is my pleasure, first and foremost, to be a part of this panel today. I am an author and a speaker. I've been speaking on the topic of sexual trauma as well as sex addiction for the last 12 years. I've created a book, and all of my work kind of centers around that healing process, as I myself went through that process of healing, as well as just forgiveness in that process, learning how to grow beyond that and learning how to love myself. I am a mother of 3 as well as a grandmother now. My oldest is 24, my youngest is 16, and I have been married for 15 years. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Nicole. We're gonna go ahead and have Sharice introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Sharice Gregory, and I am an independent travel agent, and I also do some reselling online. I'm single, mother of 2. Kids are 31, sorry, I had to think about that for some reason. My kids are 31 and 16. And I am just here to share my story and my journey, and also just for healing, to be honest, and for growth, and just to move forward and not to carry around this with me anymore.
Thank you, Sharice. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Again, my name is Kara Warner, and I am the host of the discussion. However, I am a survivor of sexual assault as well. I am a mother of one. My son Zakai, his birthday is actually tomorrow. He'll be 8 years old. And I am, again, the founder of Manifested Purpose, LLC, Family Life Education and Coaching. And I want to thank all of those who are tuning in right now. We appreciate your support. If you do have questions during the discussion, please feel free to post your questions in the comment area, or yes, the comment area. And we will try to get to your comments as best as we can. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions. And I'm going to ask Ms. Nicole to answer first. Nicole, did you or could you tell us about your experience? How did it come about? What were your thoughts? And then we'll go into some deeper questions after you share your experience with us.
Well, I would say for me, it has been several incidents over my lifetime. My very first one that I can remember is age 5. And then the most traumatic one for me was age 7, when my uncle put a gun to my head. So for me, that was the most traumatic one for me. And then I had a boyfriend who assaulted me when I told him no, as well as situations where had I not been being aware of my environment, I probably wouldn't be here today because of what the verbal assault was moving into.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing. Sharice?
My experience happened, I was 16, and I was with a person that I knew. So that was traumatic in itself, because I trusted the person. That was very difficult to deal with. It was just the one experience.
So Nicole, I'm gonna come back to you. Well, both of you mentioned that you did know your attacker. Nicole, you knew both your attackers, correct?
Correct.
So that was going to be my second question. Did you know your attacker? Since both of you knew your attackers, was it more difficult, or was it difficult for you to navigate and process through what should occur or what should occur next? What should happen next? Were you stagnant in your feelings? Just kind of share with the audience what you were feeling, especially with knowing your attacker. What sort of feelings were you experiencing?
Well, for me, I would have to say that I was already being terrorized by this individual. I was already in an environment where I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel heard. I was left in the care of this individual several times. And when I did finally bring it up, I was called a liar. So for me, just a feeling of being unsafe, of being unloved, being unwanted. And then there was a layer of my race that added to that. Being in an environment where racism was very much a part of the equation. So for me, it was that really feeling unsafe and feeling like nobody else really cared or mattered. I mean, I'm walking around with bruises all over my body, and there's no nobody cares. So.
Cherise, are you ready to share?
Yes. I was very confused. At 16 is already pretty, as a teenager, confusing, can be a confusing age. And so I was just confused. I was shocked. I didn't really understand why that person did that. Um, I felt ashamed and embarrassed, and I was also accused of not telling the truth, that I was lying. So it was just a bunch of emotions that were difficult to try to sort through.
Yeah, as a sexual assault survivor, I can say that I felt the same emotions. Was somebody that I did know, and at the time, this person was considered an acquaintance. Didn't know the person very well, but knew his name, knew some of his background, knew where he worked, and to navigate through, like at first I didn't know what to call what was happening. I didn't know how to identify what was happening, and then it once it took place, and then afterwards, I still didn't want to identify it as rape. It just didn't sound right to me. It didn't sound right because I knew him. It was a lot that we as survivors have to process after, like immediately after the fact. And so when you know the person, and don't get me wrong, even when you don't know the person, it's still something that, you're grieving the loss of yourself. A part of yourself kind of dies at that moment. And so it doesn't matter who is by the hands of. It's just when you know the person. For me, I just didn't know what to call it. And for years I didn't know that. Well, I knew it was rape, but I just didn't want to call it that. It was hard for me to even come out my mouth. I've been sexually assaulted. So I definitely understand where you all are coming from with, feeling as if you're not going to be heard if you tell anybody. I didn't want to tell anyone, and the person that I actually did confide in at the time thought I was lying. Just like Nicole mentioned, she was called a liar. And so a lot of survivors go through the anguish of feeling like it's their fault. Feeling like, well, maybe this really didn't happen to me. Maybe I'm making this up in my head. What could I have done to prevent this, so on and so forth. So I personally understand where you all are coming from with, how it truly impacts our mental capacity, and through the days of processing what's going on, you can almost not focus on anything else. So it's definitely a process. I know that I mentioned that I blamed myself for quite some time. Nicole, was there ever a time that you thought maybe I could have prevented this? This is all my fault. What were some of the emotions you were feeling centered around blaming yourself?
So as you were talking, I was thinking about the situation. I was dating a guy, and I had mentioned to him that I thought about dancing. I have been a strong individual since that first situation. So I always wanted to make sure that nobody else was going to take care of me, so I was going to take care of myself. And so I was struggling financially, and so dancing came across my mind. And so in Pillow Talk, I was having this conversation with this gentleman, and at worst, I thought he would call me a hoe or something like that. And he looks to me and says, well, I'm a pimp. I got girls out in Bellevue. And I kind of looked at him kind of strangely. He lived with his mom and then moved in with me. And then his next response to me was, well, if that's what you're going to do, you're going to come work for me. So in that instance, I felt complete shame and guilt. Fast forward a few more days later, I was on my cycle and I told him no about having sex, and he decided he wanted to rape me. I knew in that moment that it was rape, but I felt like I broke that idea of who I was to him. So I deserved that response. And so that was my guilt for me, because I felt like, well, if I wouldn't have told him that I wanted to be a stripper, then he wouldn't view me that way. Then he wouldn't think it's okay for him to treat me that way. So that was my response. And it took me a while for me to really sit back and really think about that. And the violence in it made me, which sounds really bad, but the rape itself didn't make me want to get rid of him. It was the violence associated with the rape. Because if you can beat me in the process, then you can beat me at any other time. And it was that flashback of my uncle. And so I quickly got rid of him. But I held on to that feeling that I shouldn't have said. I shouldn't have told him what was on my mind. And so in that moment, from that moment going forward, there was a lot that I didn't tell people. A lot of thoughts that I had. I just felt like, well, then it's kind of the go ahead for them to abuse me in any way that they want to. And I'm supposed to take that because I opened up that door.
Thank you, Nicole. Sharice, same question.
Okay, the shame, yeah, definitely, especially when you know the person, because you do blame yourself. You know, I shouldn't have went to that person's house. I shouldn't have hung out with that person. And those are things that you do with people that you know and trust. Yeah, I definitely blamed myself. And it's blame, you feel humiliated, and shame, that's a big one. You just feel ashamed and you really, really beat yourself up. I beat myself up for many years. I really did. So I totally identify with that as well, because you do blame yourself. And also one point that you brought up, Kara, too, I identified with that when you said, I didn't know it was rape. Like, that's the same thing, like, because it's like, you're like, okay, but I knew this person. And so I think I was told when I did talk to someone, well, you know, that's date rape. So it uses someone you know. So that is like, wow, like I had to really process that as well. And it's just difficult. The whole situation, whether, like you said, whether it's someone you know or not, it's difficult, but it's really, really hard, and it's confusing to process, like, why would this person that I know do this to me? So I definitely identify with that as well.
Yeah, thank you ladies for sharing. I can definitely empathize with you both. I felt the same way. A lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of feeling like it was my fault. Yes, you know, in all situations we can take accountability, but I definitely pinned all the blame on me because I knew the person, like Sharice, you said, and Nicole, like you said, because I was at his house, because I had been drinking, you know, in these uncompromising situations where, you know, I should have known better. And, you know, I carried that for years until I went to therapy. And it definitely impacted the way that I carried myself within other intimate relationships, or not other intimate relationships, but intimate relationships. And so I guess I'll ask that question next. How did the sexual assault impact the way that you engaged with men afterwards, or it just in any relationship, really doesn't have to be intimate, maybe friendships, maybe relationships with your children. How did that impact your relationships overall? Nicole, if you want to go first.
I would say at a very early age. So for me, okay, I'll go back a little bit. With my first sexual experience being that of an assault at 5, I actually started having sex at 5. And so sex, for lack of a better terms, ended up becoming a coping mechanism for me. But at the same token, I was a robot in that moment. I kind of checked out of the experience. It's kind of it's really a double-edged sword. So I ended up having a sex addiction. And so for me, I ended up not necessarily being the aggressor, but if that's all I'm going to be to somebody is a sexual tool, then that's what I'm going to be. I love my mom to death, but she said something to me that is both very powerful and can be very damaging. She said she doesn't care what she wanted me to be in life, but whatever I was going to be the best at it. And what was shown to me in those situations was I was a hoe. And so if I am going to be treated as a hoe, if I'm going to be violated, then let me be the best at what I'm going to do, if that's what it is. But I closed off the rest of me to the rest of the world. So for the rest of the world, for a long time, I didn't show any emotion. It just kind of slowly but surely, just after situation after situation, and it doesn't mean that those situations were traumatic as far as it damaged how I viewed myself more so than anything else, and how I interacted with everybody. For the longest time, I didn't hug my children because I felt like I was too afraid that I was going to violate them because I had been violated. I was too afraid. I wasn't a touchy-feely type person at all. I hated people to touch me. I hated people being in my personal space. I was always aware, hyper aware of my surroundings all the time, and very suspicious of every guy. And then I became suspicious of women as well. Later on, it wasn't necessarily a sexual assault type situation, but I had a situation where I ended up having to be aware of both men and women. And so that just kind of put me in this, I compartmentalized everything in my life because there was things that I could control. I started lifting weights at 8 years old to try to protect myself. And I became very, very aggressive very early on. I wasn't aggressive towards women, but I was very aggressive towards men for a long time until there was another situation that took place with that same uncle. But what happened was that complete intimate separation took place for me. And so it was like there's the outside world and then there's me. And the outside world doesn't get access to me anymore because you violated me. So that's kind of what that extended to.
Very powerful way of explaining that process and how your relationships look like. Very similar to how I felt. Sharice?
Yeah, wow, that was very powerful, Nicole. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I completely shut down, to be honest. I completely shut down. I'm kind of just now realizing that that's what happened. I just I was just like, that was my first experience, which was shameful. And so I was just like, this is what it's all about. I don't want any parts of it. And I just shut down. So yes, that has affected how I interact with men. Like you mentioned, Nicole, about I'm very hyper vigilant. Like I'm better now, to be honest, that I'm older, but back then it was really, it was really bad. I didn't trust, I just didn't trust men, to be frankly honest. I always thought they were going to try something or do something and then not, listen to me or be respectful of my wishes. Something else I do have to share, that's a major part of my story is when I was violated, it resulted in a pregnancy. So then I was a teen mom. So that in itself was very difficult, and also to process what happened to me. And then I was all of a sudden a mom was just extremely overwhelming. To be frankly honest and transparent, I had to put in the back of my mind what happened to me, because I was like, I have a child to take care of. So I just pushed what happened to me in the back of my mind. To this day, I don't know how I did that. Yes, I do. It was by the grace of God is how I did that. But I will say it did not allow me time to deal with what happened to me. It was just, my story is very long. I don't But anyways, I just wanted to share that because that's a major part, and I did not deal with what happened to me. So I just immediately focused on raising my son with the help of my mom and my family. So I did not deal with that at all. But I did not, and I was so young. So, like dating and the things that girls are doing at that age, I was scared to do. I was just like, no, I'm not, I'm taking care of my child. I want to talk to anybody, because I was really scared for a long time, to be honest. I really was.
Again, both of you have such powerful testimonies, and it's actually, it's giving me chills right now. The power that was given to you by God to overcome such a traumatic experience. Sharice, with yours resulting in a pregnancy, and how you essentially had to halt your healing process so that you can raise your son. And both of you are just, I have to commend both of you for being able to rise above what's happened to you and now speak your truth and speak your testimony with boldness, because I guarantee you you're helping someone to overcome even now. Thank you so much. With me, Nicole, the way that you processed the sexual assault and the emotional or the disengagement that you experience in relationships, I think is how I processed it, or how I operated thereafter. I would probably consider myself a sexual person before the rape. And with that being said, that was even more of a reason why I didn't want to tell anybody, because I didn't believe anybody was going to believe me, because I had already been out there, and even when I did tell someone and they didn't believe me, that further made me feel as if I was devalued already as a person. And so with feeling devalued and feeling the lack of self-worth, I really kind of gave up on myself, especially within relationships, because I did feel like I was only good for sex. I did. And at one point, I was so hyper aggressive, as you mentioned, Nicole, that I took on the form of the masculine. I was super aggressive with my friends, my female friends, super aggressive with the men that I was in relationships with. And I absolutely took on the masculine energy form. And with that being such a dominant energy, you know, it confused me because by nature, my genetic disposition is very feminine. I've always been told I'm a girly girl, but I felt like I had to protect myself. And the only way that I could protect myself is through dominance. And then also to numb the pain of so many other traumatic experiences that has happened in my life, but then also this one experience that has happened, and I feel like I can't go to anybody to shield me and to protect me and to kind of numb that pain. I numbed it through sex and alcohol. So it's crazy how we go through these traumatic experiences and we just often feel like there's no way out. I felt like I was in jail in my mind. I did. I felt like I was behind bars for years because I didn't have healthy coping mechanisms. So my next question is going to be, how did you find a proper way to heal? When did you find a proper way to heal? Did you ever find a proper way to heal? And I can only imagine that that you both have somewhat because you're here today speaking about it. So can you share with us how did you go through, what were the beginning stages of the healing process for you? Nicole, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So for me, I would say outside of that, it was a series, I'd say for the first 14 years of my life, maybe longer than that, was just a series of just chaos for me. And so I tried going through therapy. I tried talking to other people. I just found another situation where it was another traumatic type of situation for me. And then I had my children taken from me. So for me, I had my first kid when I was 13 and my last one when I was 21. And for me, they were my world. So that was my place of refuge, my place of at least somebody loves me, at least somebody cares. I didn't necessarily tell them everything until way later on in life. But that was my glimpse, my little flicker in the world. I went to church. I tried church several times, and I'd have a situation at church where there's the assumptions of who I was or what I was. So I didn't find refuge there. And so oddly enough, I was contemplating suicide. I had a hoopty. So for those that don't know what a hoopty is, the trunk of my car sat in the back seat. My driver's side window didn't roll down. Every couple of blocks I had to put antifreeze in my car. So I didn't have no heat. It was the middle of winter. We had just had a real bad snowstorm. So I knew if I had had a car accident, that they would not suspect suicide. I had planned the details. And so for anybody who is in that space where they feel like, why am I here? Am I just here for somebody to just, for lack of a better words, to torture, to put their trash on, to use me as a bucket, to use me as a hole to dump their stuff in? If that's all that I'm here for, and I'm not here to be loved, and I'm not here to feel safe and secure and to know that the things that I am doing matter, it's time for you to reach out and talk to somebody. And oddly enough, there was a square gentleman who was so far out of my realm of guys that I talked to, and I was not necessarily, he wasn't a sexual interest. He was a true friend. And we sat down, and for a couple of hours, we had a long conversation. And in that conversation, he got a glimpse. That was just like the tip of the iceberg. So he got me out of that crisis. And I started my healing process then, to know that somebody was willing to just sit and listen and just let me cry. I hadn't really cried, like that soulful, wailing cry. I mean, just from the pit of my ancestors' cry. I mean, we're talking about generations of trauma, and just starting that healing process of just talking. The amazing point of just talking. And then we ended up in a sexual relationship. And my coping skills that I had at that time kicked in again. And so I ended up going on a binge. And for those that don't know what a binge is, I went and I had a threesome. And he could tell immediately. And I hadn't told him about everything. I hadn't done that process. I hadn't actually told anybody about everything. Like, there's so much stuff that I had, stuff that you don't consider a sexual assault, that actually is a sexual assault. And even though you're a consenting party in that, when you have somebody older than you, or you have somebody that knows better, or you're in a situation where you have sex with somebody and you feel dirty afterwards, like you just can't get the filth off of you. After I told him that for the first time, I felt such a relief to just get it out, just to talk about it, just so I wasn't holding on to it anymore. So I wasn't, for me to be exposed, for them doors to be open, and for somebody to see me, to see Nicole, not Nikki, who I told everybody I was, not this person that over here was a good mom, over here was a good student, over here was a good employee, but come 5 o'clock on Friday nights, I'm picking up my next fix. That started my healing journey. And in that process, we did a lot of fasting, a lot of praying. We fasted for 3 days. We fasted for 5 days. We fasted for 7 days. We fasted for 30 days. Just the amount of work that we did together, and the amount of work that I was able to do for myself with the support of somebody else, and coming and saying, this is, today is not a good day. And I still go through that. Your healing process never ends. There's always, I'll say this, when my uncle who raped me passed away from a massive heart attack. And at that time, I was working for Mutual of Omaha, and I was taking those calls from other family members who have passed. And when I got that phone call, I had two feelings in that moment. I had done a lot of healing, but there's still some forgiveness that you have to do. And I had to come to realization, I never got the chance to talk to him about what happened. I never got the chance to address him. And I watched him grow and become a young man and become a father. And I watched that transition for him, but I still had that, he not only violated me, he violated another lady. But in that moment, I had this, good, you need to go. At the same time, I had, should I feel this way because this is my uncle? And then I had the thought, he's still a human being at the end of the day. And no, he didn't get justice. No, it didn't come the way that I wanted it to come. No, he didn't say, I'm sorry. But in that moment, I had to let things go. So that was another layer of forgiveness. And so just my life has been that. The gentleman who raped me, who I was in a relationship with, I was in drug and alcohol counseling. So I was in my practicum, actually at work, and here he comes walking through the door. And without saying a word, at first I felt scared because I hadn't seen him since then. And then I had to realize I need to address him and take back my control and take back my power. And just doing something as simple as saying, hey, how have you been? And changing that power dynamic did some healing for me. So healing comes in so many different ways, but it's never a one-stop shop. It's never a, okay, I've done this and I'm good. It's I have to continue to check in. I have to continue to, as these individuals pop up, because they will pop up in your life and they will show themselves, and you do end up having to interact with them. And then you go, okay, how do I interact with them? And how do I take back my power? Because when somebody violates you, they take power from you. Rape is never a sexual thing. It's never a sexual thing. And I didn't understand that, but it's really the control. They have taken control over not only your body, but your spirit and your emotions. And so by addressing them head on and showing them, I'm not afraid of you, and not in an aggressive way, just simply, how was your day? How are you doing? I hope you're doing better. I'm doing much better. And showing them that I've moved past that has been a healing process. And then I wrote my book, which that whole process took 8 years to go through.
8 years. Well worth 8 years.
So going through that whole process, and then when I go speak to people and I hear from them that they're going through those things and that they can relate. And I've had young ladies who I have walked through that process of them telling somebody, or just finally feeling the courage to come out and speak about it, as a healing process within itself, because it lets you know that what you go through is not in vain, and it's for the benefit. It's fortunate but unfortunate that it helps somebody else, and it can prevent somebody else from going through those things. To say, hey, look, pay attention to your environment. And if something happens, keep talking about it. Don't stop talking about it. Keep your voice loud and keep your voice heard. And even if people tell you, well, I don't believe you, somebody will. And it only takes one person.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nicole. Cherise, same question.
It was about the healing process.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was into listening to Nicole. Her story is so powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah, me and her kind of, yes, we, well, it, like she said, it's an ongoing thing. As I mentioned, because I was a mom, I did not address what happened to me. And through the last few years, I'm realizing that I did not do that at all. So it has been an ongoing journey for me. When she talked about, when you talk to someone and actually like listen to you, and my big thing was, to be honest, I felt a lot of shame because I was in high school. So that alone, I went to school at Papillion, and it's not very diverse there. No offense, Papillion monarchs. So I was the young teenage Black girl who was pregnant, who I was already shy and quiet, who didn't have a boyfriend. So it's like, they're looking at me like, she's pregnant, who is she? So it's just all of that was very difficult. It was. I did finish high school, but I did switch, and I think I did that more to myself because no one was saying that to me, but I'm sure, like, you know, in high school, there's the whispers and people looking at me. And some people knew, my close friends, but not everyone knew. So then I switched to go to night school because everyone was nice, but I just felt so much shame. And I don't even know how many of my classmates knew that, knew my story. I know a few knew, but I just felt so much shame. And so I asked my mom, could I go to night school? And she said yes. She was like, well, you're finishing school, which I was like, yeah, I know. But I just didn't want to go to days to school with it. There was less people at night. So we did have, I just remembered this actually, we did have like a little, there were a couple other girls pregnant at school, but you know, they had boyfriends. So the situation was different, but we did have little meetings and we were able to talk to each other as far as being pregnant. But at that time, I did not share the rest of my story with them. I wasn't ready to do that. And my counselor knew. So it's just been an ongoing journey for me with the healing. But as I got older and my son got older and I started sharing my story with certain people, some reactions would make me kind of shut down and not share because they just didn't understand. And I would feel embarrassed, to be honest, because people started asking, oh, who's his dad and stuff like that. And that I did not prepare myself for. And so that brought up feelings. I would get angry, not at the person, but I would get angry with myself and I would feel embarrassed, you know. So I kind of I kind of started making up a story, to be frankly honest, about his dad, just because I was embarrassed, not of my son, but of what happened. And then I didn't want people to think of my son a certain way or to think of me a certain way. But as I got older, I realized that wasn't good either. So when I was able to actually share that part and to have someone actually listen and not judge me and just actually listen and show empathy, that was really healing. Like, okay, someone, like Nicole said, someone actually cared. They weren't judgmental. They just listened and they just hugged me and cried with me. And so that was really healing. And I have met lots of people along the way. Not everyone knows my story. Well, now everyone knows, but which is okay. Um, that have been really, really understanding and to that. So that is healing, to actually be able to talk to people who've gone through those things and for them to listen to you and not judge you, not, you know, look at you sideways or ask you a bunch of, intrusive questions, but just to actually listen, and that is healing. I did go to counseling when I was younger. I have not been in a while. Church, it wasn't so much church that it was God. It was God. I just have to give glory to God. So it wasn't so much church. I am very spiritual. My mother, I have to thank my mom. She was amazing during this whole process. There's no way I could have gotten through any of this without her. Um, and God, because I don't know what else to put it on. I really don't. It was God. And that's just, I don't know what else to say about that. It was God, because I know I should not be in my right mind right now, to be frankly honest. Just to keep it real. I also, I did a lot of drinking young, which I know we do that, but I know a lot of that was part of, I just didn't want to remember what happened either. I didn't want to remember that. So I would just act like it didn't happen, to be frankly honest. So.
Yeah, all of what you all experienced as far as your healing process is, it's not uncommon. And so like what Nicole said about, if there's anybody that's going through this, anybody who's feeling suicidal, anybody who is turning to substance and abusing drugs or alcohol or alcohol, you know, those are the easy fixes, right? But really digging deep into the core of what's happening with you at this moment is truly, truly important. And we all three of us, I know, encourage anybody who's listening that has gone through this and hasn't gone through the process of healing. We encourage you to please reach out to someone you trust. If you don't know where to go, someone you trust, start there. I know when after my rape, I didn't know who to really talk to. I told someone and they didn't believe me. And then I kept it to myself for quite some time. my outlet was poetry at the time. I used to write a lot. And one day, for some odd reason, I believe it was God, but I had written a poem about my rape experience. And I was living with my mom at the time. I was a sophomore and junior in college. And living at my mom's house at the time. And for some reason, I left the poem on her computer. So I don't know if subconsciously I was trying to tell her, but I hadn't told her when it happened. She found the poem. She read the poem. She came to me with the poem in her hand. And she said, I knew it. I was just waiting for you to tell me. And then I just started crying. I just balled up and cried in her arms. And then she went on to tell me she was raped almost in the same manner that I was at the same age. So when we talk about this, when we talk about these experiences, we also have to identify the fact that a lot of this is generational. Whether you believe in generational curses or seeds that have been planted from generation to generation, a lot of this is generational. And a lot of these occurrences also happen in the household. Family members experience this with other family members, and we are told to sweep it under the rug. And that's not the truth. We should not sweep this under the rug. You know, we want to always discuss these high profile sexual assaults, but we never want to expose who's doing the assaulting in our family. And so we need to fight against generational strongholds and generational curses that are attached to our family and our family lineage. So I wanted to express that as well. I'm going to ask one last question because this hour went super fast. But one last question is, did you feel, or do you feel like you have a responsibility now to advocate, to be of support of the movement? We have the Me Too movement. There's organizations locally here, such as Heartland Family Service and the Women's Fund of Omaha, Freedom from Violence, Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, so on and so forth. Do you feel like you need to align yourself with these organizations or individuals who are speaking out against sexual assault? Or do you feel like you as an individual, do you feel like this is part of your purpose to speak out against sexual assault? Nicole, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I will say for me, I went through training for sex trafficking. So I do periodically do some trainings for hotels with that. I am currently working on a conference. So I will be reaching out to you, Kara, after we get done. Coming in, I'm thinking in March or April. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so I'm wanting to do a conference centered around that. I do have some ideas of what that looks like. And so a lot of what I do, a lot of my purpose in life, a lot of the things that I do is dealing with the healing of that as well as the prevention. I started it within my own home, with breaking that curse within my own family first, and then moving to her friends and other ladies in the community. I definitely will be connecting with several organizations, hopefully, for this conference. So I will be gathering young ladies across Omaha and hopefully the surrounding areas. It just kind of depends on the whole pandemic thing, where we're at come those months. But I am definitely looking at getting that together because I feel like that's really important for us to gain back our power and to gain back our voice. And so that is really the foundation why I did my book. And I have a second book, which is A Woman's Secrets. and how those things transitioned into my sexual addiction, and then how was I able to get out of that. So I kind of look at, I kind of come from it from a different angle other than just the sexual assault aspect of things, because a lot of women who have been sexually assaulted, and if we did the real statistics, I'm pretty sure it's 8 out of 10 women, honestly, when we really look at the grand scheme of things. So what is that? What is the response that we have to that? What is our response? Because our response is what makes us a survivor or a victim. And so looking at that, that's really where I'm going at. And I'm currently in school for psychology. I'm looking to get my master's in psychology, and I'm looking to become a sex addiction therapist, more specifically in the Black community, because in our community, sex addiction is not recognized. Right now, it's considered a sexual compulsive disorder. And so I'm looking at getting that put back into the DSM, hopefully the DSM-6, which is a long process. And so my purpose in life and everything that I do centers around that empowerment of our voices, and that empowerment of our healing, that empowerment of us taking back our strength as women and as men, because it's not just women who get violated. And I think it's really unfortunate because as women, we could talk about it. We talk about it a lot more than men do. And I feel like our men need that support as well. And they don't get that support. And they don't, where we don't get believed, it's tenfold for them. And so also supporting them in their journey of getting their voices heard as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I look forward to connecting with several individuals. And I will say that a fashion show will be a part of that, because that's part of my background. But how do we protect ourselves? And so that's what that conference will be about. And so I'm looking forward to being able to make that announcement here pretty soon.
I'm excited. I'm excited, Nicole. And real quick, could you mention the title of your first book and where our audience can purchase?
So my first book is a Girl's Secrets, and that is, you can get it at the African American bookstore once they open back up again. It's also at Divine Inspiration, which is on like 24th and Grant, and it's also available on Amazon. And then tomorrow I will be vending at the Startup for Success event. So I typically have my books with me at all my events. So definitely come out and you can have a one-on-one conversation, or set up a meeting. I also do coaching as well on this topic. So I'm helping young ladies overcome that trauma as well. So that's part of what I do. And it is available on ebook, and as well as printed copies. And then I am working on getting my ebook done because we are always busy. So that should be coming out here soon as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate you. Cherise?
Really quickly, my purpose was to share my story for healing. And I do have, I have a passion for helping women and healing as well. So I would like to use my story and testimony for healing as well. So I definitely need to get with you, Nicole. We've spoken before, but yeah, I know, like you said, it sounds weird to say this, but I want to use this as a purpose. What was meant for bad, I want to turn it into good, and that's what I will do.
Amen. Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you both. You have no idea.
Kara, I want to just chime in real quick,
Yes.
because I think this is really, really important. So for you raising a child out of that experience, I've met another young lady and watched her in that process of raising a child from that type of situation. And I think that's so powerful because it's unfortunate that it's not an isolated situation. And I think that your voice needs to be heard, definitely, and how you've been able to cope with that. Because even though you don't think that you've been coping with it or that you've been healing from it, you have raised a son from it. And in that process, you've had to do healing in order to do that. And so recognize that you have done a lot of healing in this journey, even though you may not have wanted to recognize that as a healing journey. But being able to pour love into your son, regardless of how he came into the world, shows a tremendous amount of power that you have within yourself. So I just wanted to recognize that before we close out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Nicole. And yeah, Sharice, Nicole, you've been doing this work, sis, for a minute. And again, what you've been through, it wasn't in vain. God sees us through, and he gives us, he allows us to grow from these experiences. Our testimony is not just for us. We're not supposed to keep our testimony bottled up. We're supposed to use our testimony to help heal others. And so I want to thank the both of you for allowing God to use you tonight, allowing God to use you as one of his vessels to help heal somebody or a group of people who just didn't know where to start. And I believe that we can start by freely talking about our experiences and freely talking about our traumas and freely talking about our fears and our anxiety, because it's still there. It's still there. Even though we're talking about it on a public, very public platform, I'll be honest and say that this moment did give me anxiety. It gave me a lot of anxiety, actually, more than I thought that I would have today. But because it triggers something within me and my body is used to responding in a particular way, when I'm reminded of that trauma, I became anxious. But I am so glad that we did this. I am so glad that even though we had naysayers, that we spoke the truth. I'm so glad of that, or for that. So I want to thank the both of you for coming on. I truly appreciate you all. Nicole, I love your spirit and what you're doing, and you creating and being innovative in this line of work. Sharice, peace and blessings to you, sis. You are so tremendously brave. I love you, I love you, I love you, and God has so much in store for you. So much in store for you. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We will have a part 2, and I will keep everyone posted on the date. You all have a blessed night. And again, if you need anyone to speak to, please speak to someone you trust first, and we'll help you from there. All right. Thank you, ladies.